Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 8th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Nunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And we're monitoring the headlines, the Gulf of Mexico right now.
That's right. And let's get to it. Hurricane Milton became one of the most powerful hurricanes in history yesterday as it's set to make landfall in Florida tomorrow evening. We're going to have the latest on this monster storm and the evacuations. The world marks the anniversary of the October 7th attacks. Controversy in Chicago as the mayor appoints an all-new school board after mass resignations. Big changes coming to the Mega Millions. You're going to pay more for your ticket, but they say they're making the odds of winning higher. So you're saying there's a chance, Moshe.
Slightly more of a chance, Jill. They are upping the odds from 1 in 300 million to just slightly better than that.
NASA launching a probe to track down the asteroid it collided into on purpose a couple of years ago, just to see how well it did at knocking it off course.
NASA's checking their work up in space.
Al Pacino out with a dramatic revelation about almost dying and then coming back to life.
He is a dramatic actor, Jill, but this did sound like a very serious situation.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
Who's on first is your clue.
All right, let's start with Hurricane Milton rapidly strengthening into a monstrous Category 5 hurricane Monday in the Gulf of Mexico and on a path toward Florida. It threatens a dangerous record storm surge in Tampa Bay and all along the Florida West Coast. This is set to be the worst hurricane to make a direct hit on the Florida West Coast in more than 100 years. Aircraft observations currently support sustained winds of at least 175 miles per hour in its core on Monday. And Milton should remain a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane through Tuesday. It is a monster hurricane, and even though it may make landfall as a Category 3, it is still deeply concerning meteorologists. Hurricane hunters aircraft investigating the storm today witnessed an intensification streak with only a handful of recorded parallels anywhere in the world, with maximum sustained winds rising from Category 2 strength early Monday morning to a Category 5 by noon. So it is breaking records, one of the top 5 strongest hurricanes in Atlantic storm history. Milton has led to evacuation orders for more than 1 million Floridians. Up to 6 million may leave the coast over the next 24 hours. There have been long gas lines. There's been an urgent effort to clean up all of the garbage and debris from Hurricane Helene 10 days ago. The concern, all of that debris sitting on the coastline and on the streets could become projectiles as Milton comes ashore. Landfall now looks to be Wednesday afternoon or evening, and the storm, despite some weakening, is anticipated to remain a major hurricane with winds around 120 miles per hour when it strikes the state's west coast. So Milton's wind field will expand. That means the storm will more efficiently be able to pile water against the coastline. The National Hurricane Center is warning of a storm surge of 5 to 10 feet along much of the Gulf Coast of Florida's peninsula, with locally up to 8 to 12 feet, including in Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay to Fort Myers corridor is at the greatest risk from the storm. Milton will be arriving from the west, a highly unusual trajectory for hurricanes. Since 1850, there are no records of any Category 2 or greater hurricanes originating from the west and then passing within 60 miles of Tampa. So Milton's trajectory is making it primed to be a major surge producer. And we know, of course, that storm surge is what can be so deadly during a hurricane.
Yeah, the issue in Florida is East Coast and West Coast are very different. The West Coast, much more low-lying, much more susceptible to a direct hit. Now, most hurricanes that hit the West Coast of Florida, and many have over the course of the past couple centuries, that we've been able to document, they mostly come from the south, right? And they sort of graze the edge and make a turn towards the coast. This is a direct hit. We've only seen a handful of these in the history of record keeping here, going back to the mid-1800s, actually do this west to east trajectory and make this direct hit on the very low-lying area of the Florida West Coast. Now, it's important to note the track continues to shift here of 10 miles north, 10 miles south. And that's going to have an enormous bearing on the surge outcome. The way hurricanes work, because of the way they rotate, everything south of the hurricane has the worst surge. Everything north of the hurricane has the worst rain and wind. So if it somehow is able to go up Tampa Bay, that is a worst case scenario here. That's something they have been fearing in Tampa Bay for decades, and especially since how built up it's gotten over the course of recent memory here. So meteorologists are very concerned about this. State officials very concerned about this. You talked about the evacuation orders. Jill, Floridians are resilient and they typically like to be able to stay home through various storms. But even they are saying, you know what, I need to evacuate here. Now, it's really difficult because Hurricane Helene just swept through less than 2 weeks ago. So some people, their cars were destroyed and they're unable to use their vehicles. So they're trying to find ways to get out, especially in those evacuation zones, especially if you live in any of the island areas. You're going to be cut off potentially for days or longer, depending on bridges that are destroyed. So that is especially concerning here to state officials, which is why they're reinforcing get out while you can. And that really, for a number of you, is a matter of hours at this point, depending on when you're listening to the podcast. Jill, some meteorologists so concerned about this, they got emotional on live TV. This is NBC South Florida meteorologist, longtime host there, John Morales, yesterday reporting out the latest update as Hurricane Milton got to Category 5 status. Take a listen.
It's just an incredible hurricane. It has dropped It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour, and it is just gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, where you can imagine the winds. I mean, the seas are just so incredibly hot. Record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat.
Yeah, it is rare to see a meteorologist during a weather forecast get emotional there. That is what struck some people and probably urged some more people to evacuate here. The intensity level, the rapid intensification that we've seen with the storm, Jill, nearly unprecedented. It went from a Category 1 to Category 5 yesterday in just a matter of hours, from 85 mile per hour winds to 175 mile per hour winds. If there was a Category 6, it would be near Category 6 status. We don't have that, but that's how remarkable the intensification, the explosive growth of the storm has been off the coast of Mexico there as it begins to make its way across the Gulf of Mexico over the course of the 48 hours here. The people of Florida, of course, experiencing hurricane fatigue, even by Florida standards, especially that West Coast. You had Hurricane Helene just less than 2 weeks ago. You had Hurricane Idalia. You had Hurricane Debbie that blew through last year. You had Hurricane Ian 2 years ago. That was a Category 5 that killed 150 people in Southwest Florida. A number of those people drowned, by the way. They would have lived if they had made it to the mainland and followed evacuation orders. So just hit after hit here on the west coast of Florida. A lot of concern here over Milton.
All right, time for the speed read from the New York Times. Israelis marked a full year Monday since Hamas's brutal October 7th terrorist attacks, gathering at the sites of some of the atrocities to honor those killed and demand the release of those that are still held captive in Gaza. Terrorists killed about 1,200 people, mostly Israeli civilians, and kidnapped another 250 others on October 7th. Around 101 hostages have still not been returned, including 2 small children, a third of whom are believed to be dead. Ceasefire efforts have pretty much ground to a halt. 4 Americans are still believed to be alive and in Hamas captivity. At the Nova Music Festival site in Israel's southern desert, the last song that was playing before the rockets started raining down 1 year ago was played again on Monday as mourners clung to each other. Hamas terrorists murdered more than 360 people at that festival. More than 130 projectiles, including missiles and rockets, were shot into Israel by Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis to mark the anniversary of the attack, which a Hamas spokesperson claims has been a huge success despite the destruction in Gaza and the decimation of Hamas leadership and most of its battalions. A wider multi-front war between Israel and Hamas's regional allies is now unfolding, with Hezbollah, the Houthis, and other Iranian proxy terror groups joining Hamas in the attack over the last year. And Iran and Israel have now exchanged direct fire twice in the last year. And Israel is now weighing a response to Iran's 180 missile assault last week. And it's something that could happen any day now.
Yeah, the Israelis are figuring out when to go, what to go, how to go. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations with the Americans here. But that shows you where we are 1 year in. We obviously went into further depth yesterday on the podcast. Over at the White House yesterday, the President Biden, lit what's called a yahrzeit candle. That's a candle lit in memory of the dead in Judaism. He lit it alongside Rabbi Aaron Alexander, who is part of a congregation there in D.C., and also happens to be a family friend of the Goldberg-Polin family. Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, one of the Americans who was abducted by Hamas, held hostage for 11 months until he was killed by Hamas last month. That was the memorial over at the White House yesterday. Over in the UK, the Prime Minister at the House of Commons called for renewed diplomatic efforts. The French Foreign Minister was in Israel commemorating the anniversary. Jewish students in Italy placed chained, blindfolded teddy bears, each wearing a T-shirt with a photo of an Israeli hostage, at landmarks in Rome, including at the Colosseum. There was also a moment of silence that was held at UN headquarters in Geneva at a ceremony yesterday, attended by 100-plus diplomats. Paris last night turned off the lights of the Eiffel Tower to commemorate the anniversary. At the same time, there have been a whole bunch of pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel protests around the world over the course of the past few days, in Iran, in Morocco, in Australia, in India, Pakistan, Yemen, among those where you've seen a bunch of those protests as well.
Moshe, also here domestically as well, huge protests in New York City and on many college campuses across the country. Yeah,
there's a lot of back and forth, both people commemorating the victims of the October 7th assault, as well as anti-Israel protests in a variety of places.
From Axios, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson named members of a new school board on Monday. He tried to push back on criticism after all 7 members resigned amid an escalating fight over control of the public schools in the nation's third largest city. Johnson introduced an environmental activist, energy consultant, and a former school board candidate among his picks for a new interim board. The 6 people that Johnson chose will replace an outgoing interim 7-member school board that he had appointed just 15 months ago. The proposed new members would widely be expected to carry out policies the last board refused, like approving a high-interest loan to cover non-teacher pensions, and would also serve at least until a new board is partially elected next month and installed in January.
So there's a major issue in Chicago. Well, there's a lot of issues in Chicago, but among them are major financial woes, a $500 million deficit right now, rising expenses, a new deal that has to be negotiated with the teachers union. And so there were a number of members of the school board who thought a $300 million loan that the mayor is trying to push them to take out is not a financially smart decision right now. It led to a fight with the mayor and then that mass resignation last week. You have more than 40 city aldermen, the majority of the city council there, business leaders, state lawmakers, all opposed to this plan that the mayor has hatched here. The mayor says he's there to transform the Chicago public school system, and this is how he's going to do it, even if it means taking out this major loan. And if you won't implement his plans, he wants you to get out. So he was very forceful in his pushback yesterday, insisting the city elected him to transform the schools, not to oversee cuts to staff, not to oversee cuts to programs here. So now they've expanded the school board here. It's going to be a 21-person school board. 10 will be elected, and 11 of them will be selected by the mayor here. He did face protests and chants yesterday, not legit, not legit, not legit. So there's a huge fight in Chicago on the future of the school system there.
From USA Today, the cost of buying a Mega Millions jackpot dream will soon more than double. But lottery officials say that their confident players aren't going to mind paying more after changes that will lead to larger prizes and more frequent winners. Lottery officials announced Monday that it will cost $5 to play Mega Millions beginning in April. That's up from the current $2 per ticket. The price increase will be one of many changes to Mega Millions that officials say will result in improved jackpot odds, more frequent giant prizes, and even larger payouts. Lotto officials say you are still spending $5 for a chance to be a millionaire.
Yeah, Jill. Cheap. Pennies to be a millionaire.
Mega Millions and its lottery compatriot Powerball are sold in 45 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So the details haven't been fully released, but Mega Millions has confirmed that jackpot odds are set to improve.
All right, so we had to go to state officials here because Central Mega Millions won't release the new numbers, but when you go to Mega Millions officials in some of the states, they're like, this is what we're hearing. So your current odds to win Mega Millions is 1 in 302.6 million. All right. Powerball is 1 in 292 million. So Powerball, technically you got better odds on Powerball than Mega Millions. So Mega Millions is like, we got to improve the odds here, but we're also going to increase the price from $2 to $5. Now, the estimates we're getting is that Mega Millions odds will now go from 1 in 302 million to 1 in 280 million or 1 in 290 million. So slightly better than Powerball, like calculated here, like 1 to 3% better odds. So you're still in the best case scenario here. You have a 1 in 280 million chance of winning, but them's the odds, according to some of the state officials here. We'll wait for the official release. It has been a big few years, though, for Mega Millions. We've been reporting on it. 7 of the game's top 10 jackpots have happened in just the last 3 years, including 5 that have surpassed a $1 billion benchmark. Before 2021, that only happened once back in 2018. Now it's happening much more often. They also apparently will be upping the starting jackpot, which right now has been starting at 40 million, sometimes less than that. It's looking like it'll start at 50 million. So Jill, Mega Millions, one of us might win based on 1 in 280 million odds. So, those are great.
So I just looked up the odds of being struck by lightning in a given year. And it's less than 1 in a million, which makes you feel like, oh my God, I actually might get struck by lightning.
Your odds are that you could be struck by multiple times by lightning before you ever won Mega Millions.
And a little weird that Mega Millions is being so hush-hush about this, no?
Well, they also won't explain how they're going to do it. Like, statistically speaking, how are you going to make the odds better? What are you doing to make the odds better? So we'll stay on this for all of you. Lottery. It's high interest.
It's going to be like my grocery store. It's like my new grocery store gripe.
If you
the lottery.
If you work in the lotto world and you listen to this podcast, my DMs are open. Let me know what you think is going on here.
From the BBC, a spacecraft blasted off Monday on its way to visit an asteroid that NASA knocked off course in 2022. The European Space Agency's Hera spacecraft launched on a 2-year journey to the small, harmless asteroid rammed into by NASA 2 years ago. We told you about this in 2022. It was dress rehearsal for the day that a killer space rock threatens Earth. The 2022 crash by NASA's DART spacecraft shortened an asteroid's orbit around its bigger companion, demonstrating that if a dangerous rock was headed our way, there is a chance it could be knocked off course with enough advance notice. Scientists are eager to examine the impact's aftermath up close to know exactly how effective DART was and what changes might be needed to safeguard Earth in the future. Moshe, this was basically like the plot from Armageddon, if anyone had seen that movie. But they did it. They did it, and now they're just trying to figure out if it was how successful it was.
Right. They don't want to close their eyes. They don't want to fall asleep. They don't want to miss a thing, Jill. So now we have to travel into deep space to go investigate the asteroid that we knocked into. They called it a success initially. I mean, it's pretty amazing. We're able to launch something that launches into an asteroid, slightly knocks it off course. This is all part of our planetary defense that one day can help us save the planet. It separates us from the dinosaurs, Jill. We can actually potentially save ourselves from an asteroid here. Now, we should note, scientists do not believe that we're currently at risk of a dinosaur-style extinction caused by an asteroid hitting Earth. An asteroid of that size can easily be spotted in space, and we got nothing like it coming anywhere near anytime soon. It's the smaller rocks that can still do some damage. Back in 2013, you might remember Chelyabinsk in Russia. That was a house-sized asteroid that made it through Earth and blew out windows for 200 square miles, 1,600 people injured in that blast. So those are the asteroids, the smaller ones, the house-sized ones that we're still worried about that can do some real damage. That was Chelyabinsk. That was out there in sort of rural Russia. If something like that, hit a major city, it could lead to, some death and destruction there. So scientists are hoping to be able to identify those and knock them off course. So we're chasing that asteroid around space right now, and we're going to get there in a couple of years, and we'll have more to report on soon.
And from NBC News, Al Pacino revealed on a podcast this weekend that he almost died during a bout with COVID, a near-death experience that left the star actor pondering his mortality. Pacino is 84 years old. He was plugging his memoir, Sonny Boy, on the New York Times podcast, The Interview, when he recounted how in 2020 he had fallen sick at his home from COVID and that the situation quickly became dicey. Pacino said he had a fever, was dehydrated, had a faint pulse, and lost consciousness. He said, quote, "I was sitting there at my house and I was gone like that. I didn't have a pulse," adding that in a matter of minutes, I guess, or whatever it took, they were there. I had about 6 paramedics in that living room, and there were 2 doctors and these outfits that looked like they were from outer space or something.
Yeah, so Pacino, for those not familiar, he was Michael Corleone in Godfather. He was Tony Montana in Scarface. After regaining consciousness, the actor recalled, "It was kind of shocking to open your eyes and see everyone around me, the first time that's ever happened. And then the medical personnel said, 'He's back. He's here.'" So Pacino recounting this near-death experience, though he says he doesn't remember anything profound when he lost consciousness. He says he didn't see a white light. There's nothing there, he says. You're gone. Now, Pacino adds on the podcast, "I started to think about that and never thought about it in my life. But, actors, it sounds good to me to say I died once. It felt like death. What is it when there's no more?" So Pacino says it'll help his art here to have gone through that experience.
Kudos to him that at 84, he still feels like he's got a lot of acting left in front of him.
Pacino, baby. All of them now with AI and the way they can change their faces. They're going to be acting till the end of time. All right. Frankly, they're going to act from beyond the grave at this point, like AI Pacino. He's going to sign a release and Al Pacino will be starring in movies for the next couple centuries. All right, we end here on this day in history. In 1871, big event for us Chicagoans, Jill. The Great Chicago Fire allegedly started today in Patrick and Catherine O'Leary's barn. The old legend goes that Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, and the fire then burned most of Chicago, which was built by wood at that point. 300 people, 300 people dead, 100,000 others homeless after 3 days of fires. It then, we don't know about Mrs. O'Leary's cow. That was the legend. And later they said that, the story was made up. But we go with the O'Leary cow because, there's a song about it that many people learn at camp. Fire, fire, fire.
I don't know it. I feel like, is this a Chicago thing?
Well, my wife actually taught me the song. I'm from Chicago, and I didn't know what the Mrs. O'Leary song. And Alex, who's from the East Coast, she's like, "You don't know the Mrs." She's like, "I know about the Chicago Fire. I know the song." All right,
then we're going with the O'Leary's cow. It's a song. We're sticking with it.
We're going with the legend here on the Mo News podcast. All right, fast forward on this day in 1945, we welcome the microwave. Raytheon, the the weapons manufacturer, filed a patent for the microwave oven. The appliance was actually invented by an employee named Percy Spence. So Spencer had actually dropped out of grammar school at the age of 12. He then joined the U.S. Navy as a radio operator, returns from World War II, and he had studied trigonometry, calculus, physics on the side. He goes to work for Raytheon, working with radios, radars, something called the magnetron, which emits microwaves. Now, like many inventions, this sort of happened by accident. He liked payday candy bars. He would bring them to work. And one day, while experimenting with the magnetron, he found that the radiation emitted from the thing he was working on melted the peanut and caramel chocolate bar in his pocket. So then he would try other stuff. He tried unpopped popcorn. Thank you, Percy Spencer. Cold food, water. Found that microwaves could cook. And so after this, they built the first microwave specifically to heat up food. Jill, it was 6 feet, 750 pounds. It cost $5,000 in money back then, $55,000 in today's money. They put it aboard a nuclear-powered cargo ship at the time. And eventually they made it smaller, cheaper, and I don't know anyone who doesn't have a microwave these days. All right, the answer to your clue from earlier, who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third. On this day in 1942, the comedy duo Bud Abbott and Lou Costello, Abbott and Costello, launched their weekly radio show. One of their famous bits, Jill, what's on second? I don't know is on third. And it goes on and on and on.
It still hits. I still like it.
It hits. That Abbott and Costello, my dad's obsessed with that. He loves the Who's on First sketch all these years later. All right, on this day in 2004, Friday Night Lights, the film premiered. Many of you might have seen that film. Others may have only known it through the TV series, which launched on NBC 2 years later. And Jill, we end here with a bit of music history. Pitbull, on this day in 2019, trademarked his yell, his Greedo yell. It's one of the few sounds protected by trademark. Likely the first by a musical artist.
I don't know it. What is
Ooh!
it?
You know, like he does it in every song. Woo! Woo woo! He has like a woo woo thing.
Got it.
Trademark.
Moshe, we need to figure out our patent sound here
Yeah,
at the
what
podcast.
is our patent sound? Woo!
Some
Sorry,
like crazy
from
breaking news
cough.
thing.
Yeah. Woo woo! Breaking news. I don't know. I hope to be able to call myself Mr. Worldwide, like Pitbull. How many nicknames does that guy have that he's given himself? Mr. 305?
Mr. 305. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. Will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Woo woo! The Mo News Podcast coming to you live all week.
That is the energy that I need right now, Moshe. I'm into it.
Yeah, we really got to up the energy. Don't worry. I'll find my internal Pitbull the rest of the week, okay? We all have Pitbull somewhere deep inside of us.
I'm going to hold you to it.